It's not just enough to teach good curriculum anymore. And what I mean by that is that if you're going to be an effective school leader or teacher, you have to bridge the curriculum with real world experiences, inquiry-based learning, but also the kids need real examples of the discipline.
Welcome to the YSTEM podcast, brought to you by STEM by 360, where we ignite curiosity, break barriers, and empower the next generation of STEM leaders. I'm your host, Dr. Rameesh Madourie, an educator, a leader, and advocate for making STEM education accessible, inspiring, and transformative. Whether you're a student, an educator, a professional, or just someone who is passionate about STEM education, this podcast is for you. My guest today is an educator, an advocate, and community leader whose impact stretches far beyond the classroom. He has over 20 years of experience fostering educational equity, fostering leadership, and developing the next generation of leaders. From growing up in Memphis to leading one of Denver's most innovative STEAM-focused academies, his journey represents resilience, vision, and service. So with that, it's indeed a privilege to welcome to the YSTEM podcast, Dr. Fernando Branch. Dr. Branch, welcome.
Well, thank you. Thank you. It's an honor to be here, man. Super excited about the opportunity.
Definitely. So again, it's such a pleasure to have you being willing to sit and have this conversation, because I think just your expertise and the things you've done over the years, I think will truly impact the next generation. And with that, let's just dive in, right? Okay. You grew up in Memphis and experienced firsthand the challenges of underrepresented communities. Can you take us back to those early years and share how those experiences shaped your path?
Yeah. Man, I can remember a time when I was in high school and ninth grade.
Okay.
And it was my ninth grade English teacher class, and she was giving out the textbooks in the beginning of the school year. And when I opened up my textbook, it was my mom's name, right? So I think that was one of the very first experiences where I observed and noticed that there were inequities as far as resources. Because for me to be in a school in which my mother also graduated from that same high school, but 20 years later, and we were using the same resources, the same textbooks, that was just sort of a turning point, right? Of not necessarily letting my community and my neighborhood or circumstances define my potential in education. But it really fueled me because it showed me that, not everything is equal. And it wasn't just going to be enough to be good enough there.
Okay.
I had to do a lot more and really just paint my own path and take I would say take the route that others probably weren't willing to take, or maybe didn't see the urgency of taking, because I recognized it so early as a youth.
Okay. Thanks for sharing that. But you talk about the context in which you grew up. Could you give us some information regarding that? What was the neighborhood like?
Yeah. It's Memphis is one of those cities where socioeconomics and social mobility and oftentimes is hindered because of the outside interferences, crime. Okay. I think to this day, it's a city that still has challenges, right, in addressing crime and all the things that are associated with that, right? Having industry, right? With this podcast, thinking about STEAM education, man, I didn't see anything in relation to STEAM education growing up. A lot of the jobs and the opportunities were factory based. And people weren't doing that. They just weren't high earning jobs in industries that you saw people who looked like me. So I think in those ways, again, Memphis really was the catalyst of defining a level of grit and tenacity I think that I have today. Okay. But by no means was it, I would say, an easy upbringing. It was a fight, And what I mean by fight, I'm talking about like the basics. The basics were a fight. And I often say that, I was brought up in a house that's 700 square foot full of love, and that's true, right? Because you just don't know what you don't know, and you don't know what you don't have until you get exposure and you start seeing things a little different.
Okay. So, you shared that the context that you grew up in wasn't the best of the situation, right? You've also shared that when you got to school, you saw your mom's name in a book. How did that make you feel?
It was, I think, a wake-up call, right? It was, I couldn't control the narrative of the community in which I lived in, right? I went to a neighborhood school and public school, okay, to that fact, but Memphis is in Tennessee. It's one of those cities that traditionally had struggled with academic achievement, and even to this day, it's still it's a challenge because of the population of the city. I think the other factors that kind of intertwine with why there aren't as many resources per se, okay, that impacts the achievement or the opportunity gap there. So I think those experiences definitely showed me that I got to do more, and it wasn't going to be enough to be number one in my high school or to be even in the top 10, because once you've seen that as a youth, maybe the quality of education you're getting isn't as comparable to maybe what the other kids across the tracks are getting. That forces you to make a decision, right? And I think for me, it was going to summer prep programs, participating in Trio, Upward Bound, All Stars. Man, I literally did every possible program you could think of to continue to supplement my education, because I knew over the course of those next 4 years in high school, I would run into other students at, East High School or White Station High School or some of these other more prominent high schools. And I was consistently running into the same students who were, doing a lot of these programs in the summer focused around math, around language acquisition. And that let me know that, I was on the right track in spite of the fact that, I was competitive in doing what I was supposed to do in my high school, but, I still had to do more to measure myself up against my peers across the city.
Okay. Appreciate that. So you knew you had to make a change.
Yeah.
And you decided that you were going to make a change. Was there a pivotal educational moment or person who first planted the seed of leadership in you?
Oh, that's a great question. Who first planted the seed of leadership in me? Yeah, Miss Manus. I was a student in elementary who, gifted artist, very creative. I was quiet. Still am a pretty decent athlete, but back then I was a really good athlete as well. But I wasn't very good at reading and writing. I didn't discover until later in life that I suffered from dyslexia. But when I was in sixth grade, Miss Manus, my sixth grade teacher, she was, I think, that catalyst of change for me, because she saw that I was a good student and I was very creative in other ways, but she also recognized that, hey, here's something that you hadn't gotten the 4 or 5 years that you've been here at this elementary school. That lady, man, worked with me, I would say almost every other day, and would sometimes take me home even on my reading, on my writing, on my arithmetic, on my phonics, until she saw me close that gap. I can still tell you, it was first, I don't know, maybe the third 6 weeks grading period where I made second honor roll. It was the very first time in my life that I associated high academic achievement and scholastic achievement with myself. And that was, I think, the pivotal point for me that changed everything because, prior to that, I was just a good artist or a good athlete or a good student. Now, hey, I'm an academic scholar. I can do this. I can be an intellectual in this work. And she gave me that confidence to not just seek that for myself, but I also think that because of some of those previous experiences I mentioned to you that I recognized earlier, I saw the need to be an advocate for education for everyone around me.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So that seed was planted in grade 6, and I'm sure you had, possibly some other teachers or people along the way to ensure that that seed was being watered and the tree was being pruned to ensure that you got to a level of success.
Absolutely.
And I think you've maintained that path of leadership throughout.
Yeah.
So as you transitioned into leadership roles, especially within Denver Public Schools, what drew you to work on school turnaround and leadership within the community, this particular community?
Yeah. I've always sought out positions where people tend to think that there's no hope, that it's too far gone. And, my experience, I'm telling you, my experience as an educator, but also my experience as a youth, there's not too much I hadn't seen. And I knew that.
Okay.
When I came here to Denver, I think I worked at that time 11 years in turnaround straight. I started my career in turnaround, and I did 11 straight years in turnaround, where we successfully turned around a school in Memphis. I sought out, school communities that I thought I would be able to contribute and to be able to create real change. And what I mean by real change, I mean really get into the meat and potatoes of doing this work that we call education for our students. And I was blessed to, really do that for the first 10 and 12 years of my experience here in Denver, in some of the schools that needed that work the most, that I think needed what I could offer the most, which was a relentless pursuit for excellence, right? But also high levels of accountability to do really tough things, because we all can do tough things, because kids deserve, they deserve the absolute best. And those aren't easy jobs, but they're the most rewarding, and they're absolutely essential. We're going to create a better society for everyone.
Okay. So I want to take you just a step back. You use the term turnaround, and I think in general we understand what it means. But at what point does a school get to the point of saying, this is a turnaround job? The school now needs to be turned around. Is there a particular grade? At what point is the school defined as a turnaround?
Yeah, that's interesting, because I've grown a lot since those earlier years, where I think the term now has a level of endearment that it might not necessarily applies, right? But if I was to define it, I think you have to look at it in terms of, one, are there instructional systems, right, or lack thereof? I think two, does a school or school community have the appropriate and the right culture to thrive, right? And then I think the third thing is, do you have amazing adults who are cultivating a learning environment for students? Those three things, and you can see them, and you can sometimes explore them in different variations, right, of the context of a community or neighborhood, right? But at the end of the day, a school that typically is not high achieving is typically suffering from one or multiple of those indicators, right? Okay. So that's where, 10, 15 years ago, you had sweeper principals who specialized really in one or multiple of those areas to go in and to create radical change in order to, improve opportunity and access for our students, to increase social mobility at the end of the day. So that's how I think I would best define it.
Okay. Appreciate that. So at Robert F. Steam Smith Academy, you're shaping a school with a unique mission. What makes this academy special, and how do you see STEAM education contributing to equity and opportunity within our community?
Yeah, I love that question, man, and it really makes me um, it makes me come to life because of the uniqueness of this particular school.
Okay.
I think the founders, when they created the vision for this particular school, were well aware of their time in so many ways, and I think some in which I want to articulate and speak to. One, having global citizenship as a component. Two, having the HBCU focus here in Colorado, where African Americans don't make up a huge population, right? And then I think the third thing is really the STEAM component, the science, technology, engineering, and mathematics and arts. Having that as a component and really digging deep into that and saying, hey, students can they can do more. They can go into the hard sciences and they can be very successful. That's revolutionary within itself, right? And then on top of that, building out competitive programs, as well as, an amazing place where SEL, social emotional learning, and relationships are at the center of the student education experience that has been one of the best environments for me personally, but I can also say it's been one of the funnest jobs and schools that I've had the opportunity and the pleasure of working in for that reason.
Awesome. If someone's considering this school, a parent's considering this school,
yeah.
In 30 seconds, what would you tell this parent that their child will definitely receive after having this experience?
Yeah, they're gonna, I'm gonna take something from my alma mater, but they're gonna get a quality education with a personal touch. They're gonna get a school where they're gonna be pushed, where they're gonna be challenged, where they're gonna get the opportunity to develop soft skills, interviewing. They're gonna know how to really stand out in a room, how to introduce themselves, but they're going to be competitive and they're going to understand a global perspective of the world. We take our students on international tours. We just did Costa Rica, and next year is Italy. We're really going above and beyond to personalize the learning experience. And I think we have an exceptional staff that really allow us to do that in a way that authentically speaks to the population of students that we serve, as well as the purpose and the design for the school.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing that. So let's shift just a little bit. Your research on law enforcement impacts on black male principal is real powerful.
Yeah.
And so can you share, what did you learn and how and why is it important for leadership and equity?
That is a fascinating question. You did your research, man. I'm
impressed.
In my research, I discovered that there was never established relationships between not just black male principals, but black males in general in law enforcement.
Okay.
And I also learned that a lot of the triggers and the trauma that law enforcement officers experience, as well as black men in general in America, are very similar and parallels, but they never have had opportunities to talk. So, in looking at that, there was a model around the Waters of System Change framework, where it speaks to a concept called radical container theory, where you take two opposing ideologies and you really put them together and you force not assimilation but collaboration in a way of authenticity, but to seek understanding. I think from that research and that design, I created my own framework, but more importantly than that, I really started to look at the relationship dynamic between just this human experience, right? Between subgroups, between organizations, between companies. And I started to see that there were huge gaps that exist that nobody wanted to talk about. So in my research in particular, if you are a black male who were in leadership, you didn't have a positive experience growing up with law enforcement, then how does that impact your leadership? Right? And that's why I really wanted to kind of unpack it, because I thought that research, and I still do believe that research on both sides as far as educational leadership, but also for law enforcement, shows we have to tackle these situations head on, and creating those radical containers within our community to allow us to have these conversations, to deeply engage in these conversations and in meaningful ways to cultivate significant change is at the core of what we do as educators, but it's also in the best interest for community.
Okay. So based on your research and what you've identified, what advice would you offer either to law enforcement or even to Black men within our communities?
Yeah, I think let's start with Black men first. I think one is we have to seek out new experiences that might be counterintuitive of how we were raised as it relates to law enforcement. I'll give you a good example. Most African American males have had something called the talk, right? It's this, this generic conversation that if you were pulled over or you were somehow involved with law enforcement, the XYZs of what you're supposed to do, right? Well, what if we flip that dynamic and start having a different talk, right? What if instead of being totally responsive, what if we looked at it from a more positive disposition where you could be the initiator of conversation, the initiator of trust, but also the initiator of relationship building. That's just not something that we were ever taught. Why?
Facts.
Right. It's a simple concept, but if you see a law enforcement officer, instead of turning around going the opposite way or crossing the street, which I've experienced in my life, right? What if I walk to that person, I introduce myself, and I say, hey, I'm Dr. Fernando Branch or Fernando Branch. I do this work, and I would love to learn more about what you do. Would conversations like that on both sides change the narrative or the experience in which we interact on a daily basis? Because I truly think that at the end of the day, the work of an administrator is a very traumatic experience. I mean, it's very, very traumatic work. And you really think about law enforcement in so many ways. There's not just parallels, but there's also synergy in which those traumas are lived and perceived every day in the work that both professions do. Sometimes we just got to put them in a room and allow them to see, I think, the human quality of each other in a space to be productive.
Okay, appreciate that. So what advice would you give to fellow educational leaders who are striving to build more inclusive and equitable schools, especially when it comes to designing STEAM programs and truly engage and empower all students?
Man, I love your questions. What advice would I give those STEAM educators? It's not just enough to teach good curriculum anymore. And what I mean by that is that if you're going to be an effective school leader or teacher, you have to bridge the curriculum with real world experiences, inquiry-based learning, but also the kids need real examples of the discipline. We have to expose them to career opportunities. We have to give them internships. We have to build corporate partnerships with organizations that are going to hire students, right?
All of which your school is known for, though.
Yes. All of course, of what we built in the last 2 years, absolutely. But that's the way of the future. Students can truly graduate from high school now with an associate degree in a STEAM area of focus and be making six figures at 18, 19, 20 years old. It's in our best interest to cultivate relationships like that and to be really intentional strategically with program design and the concepts around, really creating a solid, legitimate program that has purpose. It's not just taking a lot of courses and throwing paint on the wall, right? No, it's being really intentional and say, freshman, sophomore, junior year, senior year, these are the courses you're going to take. And at the end of your senior year, we should have that associate degree as well as that internship where you're now an advanced junior, right? And we know that you can get that internship because you might have an established relationship with a corporate partner that you've been working with 2 or 3 years in high school.
So I hear you talk about the things that you as the principal or the adults in the building will do, right? What part does the student has to play in all of this? Yeah,
that's a great question, man. Our kids have one significant part, and it's very similar to the part that we have as adults. We as adults, we have to do a job, right? And if we don't do our job, we will lose our job, correct? Because it's based off performance.
Yep.
I think in the most simplest form, we have to be able to communicate that in a way that is, I think, culturally and socially sensitive to our populations. But we have to articulate the fact that our students have one job. And what we want them to do within that job is to get paid the highest amount that they could be paid, right? Which is a quality education. And as much as we possibly can to eliminate all the other barriers in which, students experience. Create an environment that's safe, that's nurturing, that allow for mistakes, but also doesn't allow for them to not achieve at the expectation of what they should achieve at is the goal. And when we do that well, our students thrive.
Okay, so you're saying there's a level of accountability on the part of the students.
Absolutely.
And the bar is just what it is.
The bar is the bar.
Okay, because so generally what happens is the bar tends to be lowered.
Yep.
Have you seen or experienced where the bar is lowered for a particular group of students? Or
absolutely, my entire career. Yeah, my entire career, I've seen the bar lowered for African American males. I've seen the bar lowered for other subgroups as well, and it's no longer acceptable. And to be honest with you, it's what they say. Sometimes you can love students into failure and to not being successful. Well, I rather let's serve them and let's serve them into a level of high success and accountability, because they will show ownership of their education if we set the bar to the ceiling, right? But we set the bar to the middle of the room, or let's say we teach to the middle of the room or to the middle of the class, then how are our high achievers going to become great, right? And how are our students at the bottom going to reach their highest potential? They can't. So we have to be able to individualize not just instruction, but the experiences of our youth. But we have to be also very clear and transparent about what our expectations are with measurable goals, and really let them know, as well as parents. It's not just indicative and reliant totally on students. It's a family dynamic that, hey, in this particular environment or this particular school, our goal is for you to be great.
Greatness.
Yeah.
Okay. So you represent the idea of Black excellence every day in the buildings.
I try to.
Okay.
I try to, and I try to hire and retain talent that also carries that exact same desire and aspiration.
Okay. Appreciate that. So I think your experience is such that it has afforded you the ability to make certain impact or certain decisions as you move throughout this journey called life, right? And I think it has prepared you to sort of segue into the Colorado Men of Color. What inspired you to create the organization, and what impact are you seeing?
Oh man, you're really getting in today. So I was working on my doctorate, and as you mentioned, in the last 5 years, there were a lot of events that happened that you imagine researching this relationship that doesn't exist, doing all the things that would happen. Man, I felt into a small state of depression myself. It was just a lot to navigate. It took me 5, almost 6 years to finish, just because I couldn't hold all of the experience and all of the trauma and all of the lived things that I was seeing every day, in some cases on CNN and the local news, right? I came out of that experience, and my daughters and my wife were all telling me that, Dad, you should probably go to the doctor. You probably get checked out. You're not as you're just not yourself. I was real snappy around the house. I wasn't myself. And I ended up listening to them. My oldest, London, told me, she's like, yeah, you should probably get checked out. And I did, and was diagnosed with depression. And, if anybody knows me, man, I'm like the most energetic, hype person you know. But it was a humbling experience, and I really I really didn't believe it initially at first, but it was absolutely right. I was. So my doctor prescribed this, I don't know, some type of tablet, man. And I took that stuff, and stuff is a nice way of saying it. I like, no, this isn't an answer right here. This is not the answer. I just didn't like the way it made me feel. And I just didn't feel in control of my body and who I am. So the next thing I started to do, I started just calling a small group of friends around me, and I asked them, hey, man, this is like right after COVID. How's your mental health? And everybody I asked said the exact same thing. The very first thing they said, they were like, dude, are you serious right now? Like, are you playing with me? I was like, yes, I'm serious. How's your mental health? And I think from there, all the experiences that I was personally experiencing was the exact same thing as some of the most closest people who to this day, that I'm still close with. We all were experiencing the exact same thing. And we had nobody to talk to about it. We weren't talking about it at church with pastors. We weren't talking about it with our wives, which was something that a significant outlier. And from there, it really just started to morph into a place where we recognized we needed an organization to allow men to cultivate relationships grounded in their mental health, but also be able to seek out support, strategies for engagement to increase social mobility, and then skill development, because once you create something, you start to see that there are other things in connection to it, right? And we realized and we saw that the greatest threat towards men of color and black men, they weren't jobs and education, it was mental health. Because if you can't fix the mind, you can't fix the relationship that a person has with themselves, how are they going to be able to function in any form of society if they're not healed within first?
Okay. So let's consider me to be men of color, a black man listening to you right now.
Yeah.
And I'm contemplating being a part of this organization, but I'm not yet sold. Why should I join your organization? How will this benefit me and by extension the people that I engage with on a daily basis?
Yeah. So we have a saying, for community, from community, serving community. Okay. 100% of our members within the organization contribute. They bring their individual expertise, and it's not about me. It's about the community. It's about men who are healthy, who are seeking out the supports that they need to be healthy. And if we can't provide a service, we build a collaborative of other people, of other organizations, of black therapists who look like them. We work with organizations like Jason Schenkel organization that specialize in the mental health aspect of working with men in particular. We try to go above and beyond to be a one-stop shop to address the most pressing issues in some cases in which black men especially just don't have a community to be able to have those conversations. Okay. So it's a safe place. Okay. It's a place where you might come in thinking one thing and you're going to leave out thinking another, because we really pride ourselves on a high level of quality, and we want to be a staple not just here in Colorado, but we feel that MOC as an organization, CMOC as an organization, has the potential to really be an organization all over the country and hopefully one day over the world.
Okay, appreciate that. So now you sit as the principal for a school that's doing things out of the ordinary. It's not like the general school. How can schools and districts do a better job of fostering and supporting men of color in leadership?
Yeah, it's about community building, right? I think our experience is a very unique experience within itself. Okay. And I think districts that do this well understand that those experiences are very unique experiences, and you can't resolve and fix them with one-off professional development or one-off events that specifically create infinity groups to talk about surface level issues. There has to be a significant investment in the relationship building, but also in, again, the social mobility piece of providing the right resources exclusively to men of color that, coming to Denver, it took me almost 6 months to find a barber, right?
Yeah.
So it's not always the real heavy things. Sometimes it's the simple things of just knowing what area should I, be thinking about buying a home, or, where should I be thinking about going to church, right? Really having those conversations and being intentional and creating those networks that are authentic networks that feel authentic and engaging. And I think the other important thing is a continuous cycle of engagement. I think when districts figure that out and they do it well, and they don't have to do it in isolation. So a lot of organizations and school districts think that they have to carry all the weight themselves of that. There are organizations like CMOC. There are organizations like Trillionaires. There's organizations like Sims Fail. There's so many amazing organizations that are doing work like this within the community. There's significant opportunity to collaborate and be really intentional. We just kind of got to get ahead of it and be really strategic to figure out how we're going to be able to sustain them, but more importantly, give them the resources that they need to continue to be successful and to stand the fight.
Awesome. So along your journey, you've spoken about persons that have made a solid impact on you. So what role does mentorship play in helping you and students, young professionals, navigate their path into leadership and the STEM field?
Yeah, I think it's absolutely essential. I once had a superintendent tell me that everybody needs a champion.
Say that again.
Everybody needs a champion. And it's 10 years ago when I heard it. I don't think I understood it fully, but I can tell you now, you definitely need a champion, not just a person who's going to be your support when you're not in those rooms. You really need a person that's going to be that support through thick and thin, to give you the advice, to give you the guidance, sometimes to be able to provide the discipline, right, and the reflection that's needed, especially in, I think, the STEAM field. The field itself right now, STEM and STEAM, is changing so quickly. And if you're not consistently seeking out individuals to be mentors, right, not just professionally, but also the changes that are happening, and professionals who can specialize in those things, that you're not making a conscious decision that's in alignment to your career, right? So I think that's a component to it, but I also think that there's a personal component where you have to seek out those individuals that are going to give you the balance and give you the food needed to sustain you, the vitamins and the nutrients that you need in order to stay at the work, right? And with school leadership, it's no different. It's no different. You seek out those individuals who are super talented in a variety of different areas, but you also you have to find your champion, because your champion is going to be there when things are really hard, when they get really complicated, when sitting in leadership is very lonely, right? You're going to need that person to be able to tell you and to sustain you and give you that encouragement you need to stay the course.
Okay. So you talk about finding your champion, and I know you have a few champions that have supported you along the way. Could you possibly identify that one champion that you feel, hey, you know what? If it wasn't because of this person at this particular time, I would not have made the decision that I've made that has positively impacted me so much. So would you identify possibly one of those persons?
I have a couple that I could just name out.
Okay.
But I'm gonna give you the most important champions for me.
Okay.
My champion is none other than my father. My dad was a truck driver for almost 40 years. I can still remember when he used to come home, he would sit on the couch, he would put on wrestling, WWE. He would have me or my brothers take these boots off, and oh man, his feet would smell so bad. Sorry, Dad. And it would be so drenched in water and sweat that his feet would be white. And we would bring him a bush from the fridge, and he'd be the happiest person in the world. I learned the value of I think fatherhood, I think hard work,
Mm-hmm.
and just the tenacity of having grit and being relentless.
Mm-hmm.
He also taught me that you don't just put your eggs in one basket.
Mm.
So from a champion's perspective, you know, in the summertime, man, I was on the roof, putting on roofs. I was tilting gardens. You know, me driving a tiller, cutting grass all over the place. And I'm talking about from 5:30 to like 6:30 in the afternoon, where, you know, the only thing we would eat would be McDonald's pancake and sausage to start the day. And we know it was going to be 12 hours of work. And we might get paid at the end, but those principles that I learned from my dad as a young man really, I think, define to me what a true champion is, because that true champion is not going to necessarily give you what you want or what you aspire to have, right? They're going to give you what you need and what's going to sustain you and ultimately what's going to have the greatest impact on your life.
Awesome. Thank you, Dad.
Yeah, thanks, Dad.
So when you look at your journey so far, educator, leader, advocate, what are you most proud of?
The educator.
The educator.
Yeah.
Why'd you say that?
I think at the end of the day, we're only here on this earth for a very short period of time. And there's nothing more precious to me than seeing that twinkle in an adult or a kid's eye that they've learned something different, they've learned something new. And you know, as an educator, you might get that experience next week, next month, next year, or it might be 15, 20, 30 years later. That feeling, man, never changes. It just never changes. And I think the value of time and the impact that we have on students and adults that we serve, I never take it for granted, because you never know what moment or what opportunity is really going to stick to that person and change and define their life. To me, it might have been a regular conversation, but for them, it might have been that one thing that told them, this is what I want to do, or this is what I don't want to do, right? And that's the value of education.
Okay. Appreciate that. Now, with all the things you've done, all the places you've been, all the impact you've made, if you could sit down with your younger self, just starting out to teach in Memphis, what advice would you give you?
Oh, man. What advice would I have given myself? Travel more.
Okay.
There's nothing better than a global perspective of the world and to see the people of the world. It's the best education you can give a student or an adult. Stay in the classroom longer.
Even with a doctorate?
Even with a doctorate. Yeah. I probably would have doubled the amount of years I taught if I'd known now what I known then.
Okay.
Because leadership will always be there.
Okay.
But the impact of teaching, I still missed it. I miss it like now more than ever. And the older I get, I really crave to have that impact that I know it's a special type of impact that you can have as a teacher that only master teachers know, right? And you know, the last thing I think I would say would be, you know, take your time, be patient.
Be patient.
Yeah.
Okay.
Be comfortable with where your feet lie and sit in it and know that, you know, everything will be okay.
Okay. So Dr. Branch says, sit in it, basking in the ambience of where you are, and everything will be okay. So now you've shared that advice to your younger self. That's looking back. Okay. What is your vision for the future of education, leadership, and STEAM equity?
Yeah. You know, I think I'm going to be taking a trip in a couple weeks to Finland, and I'm super excited about it because I think they really are on the cutting edge of what's not just future now, but what I think the structures on how we look at K-12 and K-16 schooling is about to make a significant shift. And I think it's around the corner. I think as it relates to STEAM, I strongly believe that within the next 10, 15 years, you're going to see more traditional school models having STEAM focus areas. One, because we don't have people to backfill these jobs and these roles. Two, we need high skilled laborers in the STEAM areas of focus. And I think the third thing is that it just makes sense to be a lot more intentional with how we are promoting and are strategically structuring pathways towards both technical education, because one thing I don't think we've done well, just because you go the technical education route doesn't mean that you can't go back into the university route, right?
Okay.
Places like Sweden and Finland have done this, and they can say, hey, you can go the tech route and then still do university route. Or, again, if you're going to take the university route, what's the plan, what's the strategy, and how are we being really intentional to give students more opportunities at bat early rather than later? Because if kids can graduate with associate degrees, then it's in our best interest, both financially, right, as well as, economically, as well as, I think, socially, to be able to meet that demand, because that's in the best interest of our communities as well. Okay. So, yeah, being really intentional with school design and focus with STEAM, but also really knowing the local context of industry as well as the global context of industry is going to be like significant and key. And it's not going to be able to be done with just one-off schools. It's going to take collaborative efforts of districts to start thinking holistically about strategic school design, where it really it's intentional and focus into not just 21st century learning, but an actual placement in careers.
Okay. So, and just to tie to that, your travels is so that you could get the necessary information.
Absolutely.
To be able to ensure that your school that you lead is sort of beyond the curve. So you're pumping out the students who are ready to truly integrate into society.
Absolutely. Yeah, we graduated a quarter of our students this year with associate degrees. My goal is to continue that trajectory, but not just to continue that trajectory, is to really look at who's doing it well, what can I collaborate and borrow from them,
of course,
and what can I bring back here to have the greatest impact on Robert F. Smith STEAM Academy, but also have the greatest impact on Denver Public Schools and the Colorado Department of Education to get ahead, because I think we as a state are pretty innovative in that sense.
Okay. So the basis of this podcast is built around why STEM. And one of the last questions that we ask our guests is to respond to the question why STEM based on all the things you've just shared, your experiences, your life, your vision, where you want to go. Respond to the question why STEM in about 45 seconds.
I got a very simple answer.
Okay.
And it's why not? Our students are not short of talent, grit, tenacity. All they need is opportunity, a sense of belonging, and the right people to be able to cultivate a belief in them, to tell them that not just why STEM, but absolutely STEM and STEAM. And I think that could be the change that we definitely want to see, not just in my school, right? But I think in all schools, because all students can achieve and all students deserve to have access to quality STEAM education. That's why STEAM.
Appreciate that. So Dr. Branch has shared so much. He's shared about his experiences, how he had to develop grit and tenacity along the way. He has shared the fact that he needed to make a decision to be better, to achieve more, and just being at the top of your class in your school was not going to be enough. But one of the things that he said that's so profound, you got to find your champion. So if you're listening to this, who's your champion? Dr. Branch, I've learned so much from you today based on your experiences. Now I get a chance to truly understand why you function the way you do, and it's because of the morals, the values that you've developed over the years. Your champion as a father, the sort of the morals that he has instilled in you. So I really appreciate, again, you taking the time. Listen, this podcast is for you. If you've ever wondered, can you make it in STEM? I think we've just proved without a shadow of a doubt that you can. Dr. Branch has used his experiences to truly show that irrespective of where you're coming from, where you are now, if you truly want to achieve, you can do that through this vehicle called STEM or STEAM education. Until next time, why STEM?